Hi, this is Dwayne from Trifecta Wellbeing. This week on our Facebook page, we asked the question, is food addictive? Maybe you've pondered that question, or maybe you've had a philosophical discussion with your friends about the issue. I know as a clinician working with people, the question has come up in my own practice. And I don't pretend to have fully the answer for you about this question, but I will pose it, not in a rhetorical way, but in an exploratory way. Is food addictive? It's a controversial issue. I think the jury is still out trying to decide the issue, and information keeps compiling about this. Usually when we think of an addiction, we think of some chemical, like perhaps alcohol or cocaine. When we think of food, it usually doesn't go into that category, and we tend to have a special box for that. That's something we call process addictions. We may be splitting hairs, but when you think of a process addiction, you think of something like gambling or shopping or even exercise. But food as a process addiction, I mean, really, what does that mean after all? Except that we enjoy the process or the reward that we get from participating in this behavior. But this is where it can become a little perplexing. Because when we think of food, food is made up of chemicals too, isn't it? Now, some of these chemicals that are just naturally occurring will boost our dopamine, like cheese, for example, or a high protein meat. But what if we were to say that there are certain foods that have a very powerful combination of chemicals? You know exactly what I'm talking about. I'm talking about processed foods that are high in carbohydrates, sugar, salt, fats, even natural sweeteners. We know from our experience that if we bite into those foods, they tend to really overwhelm us and make us feel good, don't they? As a matter of fact, those foods hit our reward centers that give us dopamine and serotonin. It can make us feel really good for a while. They spike our blood sugar, they give us some energy. I know as a cyclist, it feels good sometimes to stop and get a bag of Skittles. I know in the long term that's not a sustainable strategy, but in the moment, that sugar fix can really give you that boost of energy until it eventually wears off. Let's be honest, food does help us, doesn't it? It really helps us cope. Most of our life events are centered around food and eating and the pleasure that's combined with that. Food can even help us cope with stress, cope with frustrations. It can actually help us feel like that we are regaining control over our life and making our world good again. That's where the whole process addiction begins to come in, that I engage in this behavior to give myself a sense of control when I'm feeling out of control. Let's think about this. We all need to eat. It's one of the most basic needs that we have. Our body needs fuel. It needs nutrition. Now, we eat to live, or we can live to eat, and those two are really different, aren't they? But one of the things that we can do as humans is that we can assign a lot of power to objects, especially food perhaps. And we look at food and the process of eating that food as making everything okay again. And maybe in that sense, that's where we can say in some broad sense that it has some addictive quality to it. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to just take a minute and pause, and I want you to look inside, and I want you to evaluate. I know that we can have things in life that trigger us, frustrations that arise. But really, that's my own subjective interpretation of that event that causes me to feel this certain way, that may cause me to reach out for that quick fix of sugar or fat or carbs to make me feel a little bit better about that moment. So when you look inside, I want you to stop, and I want you to ask the question, have I been using food as a primary anxiety management system? Have I been using this food to seek consolation and to seek control in my life? It's a very important question. And it's one that only you can answer. Now, look, I know I started out by asking the question, is food addictive? And I hope I haven't confused any of you as we've talked about this. And that was not my intention, but just to sort of explore it in some broad strokes. As I said earlier, the jury is still out. And we may never fully answer the question if food is addictive, but we do know that certain combinations of food have a very addictive quality to them. But here's one question I think we can answer. Are you giving food too much power? Are you using food to help regain control of your life?